seat to all things future of mobility. Goldman Sachs projects autonomous vehicles and robotaxis to grow at 90% returns over the next 10 years. Meanwhile, fleet experts generally agree that the state of the art robot, however well meaning, will soon be defeated by a metal kiosk on the curbside. The taxi cannot possibly feed a coin slot physically, and there's simply no way it can download so many consumer softwares that vary city to city, creating a very real likelihood of empty cars circling around, causing even more congestion while municipalities lose money. My guest today is solving that problem. Just last week, they delivered the first ever machine to machine, completely automated parking payment in the United States. I welcome Jim Gibbs, building the parking payments for the future of mobility. Jim, a CEO at Meter Feeder. Jim, thank you for coming on the show. And I wanted to start with you. Start with really, you're promising the ability to pay for parking through the vehicle directly.
Sure.
How does Meter Feeder work?
Great question. And thanks for having me on the show. So basically, the way that it works is an autonomous vehicle or a teleoperated vehicle is able to just pull into a parking spot. Whenever they put their vehicle into park, right? It sends us, their latitude and longitude, says, hey, we're with this fleet. And then we in turn say, okay, cool, you're in this geography and we know what that costs and we charge you the exact right amount. And then we charge like the minimum amount for as long as that car is in park. And then once it goes back in the drive, that's it. We just let the last parking session just expires, similar like you would with any parking app.
And I want to talk about some of the implications of that. Clearly, you're looking at very high precision latitude, longitude data, which is precise to the extent of a single parking spot. And so tell us a little bit about that. And also tell us a little bit about, look, you could assume you could apply some of this to all other things, that operations of fleet that cars typically end up paying for, including tolling and things like charging as well.
Yeah. So the great thing is, it doesn't need to be down to the parking space. Like, perfect example, one of the cities that have this technology right now, Dormont, Pennsylvania, right? They have one zone. So literally, if you are parked on the street in those parking areas, just as long as you have a good internet connection, you should be able to find the right spot.
And I did want to bring up your Pittsburgh connection because I know Meter Feeder is headquartered there, and Pittsburgh is a unique city which has this ancient tradition with not just mobility but new mobility. If
Yeah.
maybe Pittsburgh is the Detroit of new mobility because both Carnegie Mellon University and of course Uber's advanced technology group started there.
Mhm.
But wanted to tell us a little bit about that. Was Meter Feeder born as a result in Pittsburgh, fundamentally looking at the challenges in Pittsburgh? And I know you hail from the Long Island, New York City area as well. So
Yeah,
tell us a
yeah,
little
yeah.
bit about that.
That's funny. So yeah, I grew up on Long Island, and long story, but like my sense of rebellion, I had to get away from my parents, so I went to Carnegie
I
Mellon
have a
School of Computer
really
Science.
important question here,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
Everyone says you grew up on Long Island, but in Queens. Or I'm just saying. I'm just asking.
Yeah, yeah.
What's grammatically correct here?
You say on Long Island, and you
You grew
say
up on
in,
Long Island, all right? Not
yeah,
in
on Long Island, and in you go like I'm in the city, and I on Long Island. I don't know why, but
Fair enough, but I'll let you continue on the subject of transportation. But I'm just saying, I mean, just the
yeah.
Long Islanders, just for everyone listening here, the people from Long Island, you have a very different just sense of grammar. But this is not a grammar show.
Which, by the way, there are still some words that I'm not sure how to say because I only learned how to say them when I was living in Long Island. So we're not going to go down that path.
Which are these? Which were? Okay, fair
I,
enough.
I was about to say, like simple words that I know, like stairs. We don't pronounce R's in
Stay.
Long
Okay.
Island. So you say
Yep.
stairs, right?
All
Water,
right.
right?
No,
All that stuff. But
standing online, not in the line. Fair enough. Yeah.
yeah. So, but yeah, anyway, with that
So
said,
tell us how it's in Pittsburgh. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
so,
What's
so I,
how does Pittsburgh change you?
yeah, so I ended up coming to Carnegie Mellon for computer science. And I mean, it was like in '84, I want to say, like that's when they first had the autonomous vehicle, like the big blue bus driving around um, the campus in order to, you know, learn what autonomous vehicles look like.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
even now, if you go onto campus, you'll still see like a little white line, in certain areas where they were like focusing in this technology. So it's just something that we saw and we knew. Even though I wanted to get into video game development, somehow I ended up in parking. And essentially, that's where things started happening because it's hard to be innovative in a field where the people who you're selling to might not be the most technologically savvy type of folks, right? So
Absolutely.
it's a little bit slow moving, but that's what we do.
And tell us about, would you ever consider things like getting into tolling, even maybe charging for fuels?
Great question. But we literally have really good friends who deal with tolling, and we have really good friends that deal with fueling. So, as to not compete, we're sort of staying in our lane, and
But
it's
what
our
makes parking so unique, though? Because I'm assuming tolling would be similar, because you're going to go having to go through that little longitude and figuring out if you've gone through that toll booth.
Yeah, yeah. So, uh, especially with me, right? The technology is not the hard part. The technology is generally the easy part. Even before AI came along and started writing software for people, like the technology was not the hard part. The hard part is walking into, you know, Pennsylvania Department of Transportation and having them believe in your technology enough that they'll be able to, you know, entrust you with hundreds of millions of dollars worth of their revenue, right? That's the hard part. So we already have a good relationship with the parking authorities across the United States, and we've shown that we can do this. Same thing with our partnerships with tolling. They're good at what they do. I mean, the folks that handle both like cards, like fueling cards and stuff like that. Great,
Correct.
yeah. Wex, they have a great. We have a great relationship with them. We have no desire at all to get into that uh, that vertical.
Uh, Fair enough. And let me ask you a question, since you brought up, of course, look, you're working with large bureaucratic traffic agencies, very often transportation agencies, and you need to earn their trust for, obviously winning fairly large deals. At the same time, parking itself, there's also, I'm assuming, parking garages, independent parking private spaces that you work with as well.
Hmm.
So tell us a bit about your go-to-market. I mean, how do you earn this trust, and how do you build it so in sort of a diffuse manner? Because look, parking, yes, there may be in public street side parking, there may be a single authority that's, and even then, there's often multiple authorities, municipalities, and so on in neighborhoods. But how do you build that advocacy for something that's at the end of the day fairly disruptive?
Hmm. So we've been in the industry for 11, 12 years now. So, yeah, we literally came out with an app to pay for parking. The original vision. So back then there was an app called Yo, whereas like if you wanted to shoot a message to your friend, you literally open up the app and you just hit the button that says Yo. So we wanted to be the Yo for parking, right? So you open up the app, we know your latitude and longitude, so we clearly know where you want to pay for parking. So you just hit the button, park, right? And that was it. And you know that was great for a while, right? And then we were in the process of deploying, I want to say, 250 locations across North America, and then COVID happened. So then suddenly we were like, okay,
Yeah.
everybody's sheltered in place. 90% of all parking revenue just disappeared overnight. What are we going to do? And then, just by calling people and being friendly, being a good neighbor, I was able to find out that there were a lot of people who needed help finding and paying parking tickets for fleets. And once I did that, then I was able to, yeah, we ended up being good friends with the cities, and we ended up also being good friends with the fleets, right? Because we're saving about 40% on parking tickets just by them paying them on time, right?
So you actually
And
help large fleets find sort of unpaid parking tickets, and that's how you got that. And how did you stay the course on a city earning that, or a city and agency, government agency earning that trust for you guys? Do you
Yeah, I
volunteer?
mean, I was about to say, when all of a sudden, randomly, you just start seeing blobs of cash show up in your coffers, you're just like, oh, Jim's doing the work, right? So, yeah, it was really, you know, we go through and we do the things that we say that we're going to do. That's something that,
Absolutely. Yeah.
it's
Do the
in the
things.
tech industry. Exactly.
Absolutely. I want to talk about the big inflection point going on in the world, and autonomous vehicles is coming on, right? You're, of
Mhm.
course, design. You want to focus on autonomous vehicles, but of course, your history has been in this legacy fleet. How will parking actually change? And actually, let's get into the argument on the economics of driving around versus maybe having to park.
Right.
How does meter fitter change that?
So, first of all, great question, right? I think that it goes beyond the um, it goes beyond being able to say, hey, what's the unit economics between me driving and me just pulling over and parking, right? Because from a safety perspective, it's really hard to drive into something if you're parked. So, um,
But
yeah,
something could drive into you.
but that's not your fault,
Fair enough. Okay.
right? So, I mean, if you're in a legal spot, you should be fine. But essentially, that's kind of where it sits. If you look at these autonomous vehicles, they're a little bit more expensive on the more costly side, right? So yeah, if you look at the dollar amount for every mile that you travel, yeah, I mean that could possibly add up. Does that, if you go against put that against how much parking tickets you would possibly get versus how much you would have to pay in parking, right? Who like those numbers? It's cloudy, right? But one thing that I can absolutely say is if half the time there's no one in the vehicles, it's definitely a congestion issue. It is a
Right.
potential safety issue,
And it could
right?
be much more. Right.
Yeah, the amount of pain that a Waymo or something would have to go through if they, do something wrong is, you could have just paid 50 cents and pulled over, right? So that's sort of our thinking. When we speak to the federal government, we're speaking on the behalf of the AV companies to perhaps even
Right.
offer incentives in order for them to want to pull over and be good stewards of the road.
Absolutely. I want to talk broadly about the trends in curbside management as you work with cities.
Mhm.
What, and in addition to just look, collecting parking fees for the city itself, what does meter feeder unlock? And these could be things. I mean, look, you're essentially digitizing the parking meter.
Sure.
Working with, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, so there are other companies that do a lot of work with cameras, right? And they're doing a really good job. you know so when the cameras start coming on, like there's this one company that puts cameras on the front of buses, so if you park at a bus lane you immediately get $100 parking ticket. There's other companies that put them on poles, and the cameras are there, and they have the ability to have like a sub-second enforcement time, right? So I believe that enforcement is going to go really strict, and that's going to turn into a thing. So then, if enforcement is really strict, then payment and compliance needs to be really easy, right? So that there's nothing's getting in your way. You're literally able to just say, hey, I paid. I'm a good guy. Please don't give me a parking ticket.
but does it allow you to do things like dynamically change pricing, manage traffic more actively, uh, maybe create multi-purpose roads? Uh,
Sure.
yeah, and
Yeah.
are cities looking into that as well?
Yeah. I mean, you know, I especially being in Pittsburgh, right? Seeing
And it's
the
always
the I was about to say, but seeing the backflips that they had to do because the NFL draft's going to be coming at the end of the month, right? So if all of a sudden they're like, "Hey, hair on fire, we need to increase our parking rates, right? it, that's not going to fly, 5, 10 years from now, right? We should understand from either telematics or cameras or, some sort of sensor in order to realize how many vehicles are on that block and charge that accordingly.
And that's fair, right? And what if, at least if you've talked to cities about this, what have they said about the readiness for this sort of pricing and a price differentiation? Even is that do you think that that's going to become a trend, or do you think that's an idea that's just it's been tried and it's been beaten and that's not going to work out
I
because it's a
mean,
political issue as well?
yeah, it is a political issue, but one of the things that I'm starting to see now, which I am a huge fan of, is that some of these parking authorities are actually coming directly to the neighborhoods, and they'll say something like, "Hey, you know what? Uh, we realize that you have a safety issue and you have a cleanliness issue, and your bars and clubs are open till 4 o'clock,
Right,
right?
right, right.
So we're going to charge for parking until 4 o'clock." And all of a sudden,
Yeah.
everybody's like, "I hate that idea that you're going to charge us till 4 o'clock in the morning." And they're like, "Well, you get 100% of the revenue to go towards safety and cleanliness." And then
Yeah.
suddenly they're like, "This is great. Can you enforce 24 hours?" Right? So those are the kind of things that we're going to see. It really just comes down to the narrative that the parking authority is in charge of, right? They need to go out there and say that this is for the city and this is where your dollars are going when people are
Absolutely.
good stewards of the road.
Tell us about how some of this technology, so meter feeders technology, translates from the, let's say, the street parking, the run by the city or the municipality, to independent garages, parking, private parking spaces.
Really important, right? Because a lot of people don't think about grocery stores, like since I'm in parking, so I know that if you have, the new mom spots, right, that nobody parks in because you'd be a jerk to park in that parking spot. No one enforces that, right? So it's going to turn into a little bit more of an enforcement thing, right? So now that you have bigger, bigger parking garages and folks like that starting to take all of those gates out, right? So that we don't have to like push the button and pull the ticket, right? We can read the license plates as they go in, we can read the license plates as they go out, and we know exactly how long that they've been there, and we could charge accordingly. And those are the kind of,
And you don't need to, a person doesn't need to put in that small ticket on their dashboard, which is sort of
yeah, yeah, save trees.
save some
Because,
trees.
I mean, it was kind of funny. Like, one of the reasons why it was so long to get that technology out is because those companies, that the vendors that put those machines in there, they were making like a lot of money printing those tickets. So I really appreciate the concept of saying, hey, it's time to get rid of that technology and put in new things so that, they are prepared for autonomous vehicles.
So let me wrap up by asking you this. You're building, of course, for autonomous vehicles, but it's a market that doesn't necessarily exist just yet. How do you approach your bet then? Do you intend to serve all fleet and be entirely agnostic to AVs, or are you looking specifically to build it for autonomous vehicles? And how are you approaching a market that just simply hasn't isn't there yet?
Sure. So thing number one, yes, we are focused on autonomous vehicles as far as parking is concerned, parking payments are concerned. But yeah, the way that we make sure that this works out is that our unit economics actually work. So, we are a business, right? So we were able to, again, with partnerships, make sure that we're able to uh, bring this solution so that we can essentially all parties involved are able to win at this, right? So the credit card companies are happy, the cities are happy, the fleets who are paying for the parking are happy, and of course, me, my my team, our families are happy as well.
Very important, absolutely. And the unit, so in with the unit economics, but I also want to ask you, how are AVs necessary? The technology for AVs, are they necessarily different from all fleets, or are you just choosing to integrate only with AVs?
I'm choosing to integrate with AVs. I mean, it's like you were saying at the top. 90% year-over-year growth is pretty significant, right?
Yeah.
So I feel as though that if we grow with them, we end up being able to afford college for all of our children.
Amazing. Well, on the note of affording college for all children, municipalities, if you want to better capture parking revenue from fleets and robo-taxis, well, you know how to contact Meter Feeder. Fleets and OEMs, if you want to reduce parking fines, save on fuel, reduce congestion, you know who to call as well. Meter Feeder has shown us today that the invisible infrastructure that connects the next generation of transport to the city of tomorrow, it's being built right here in Pittsburgh. Well, for those of you listening, thank you so much. This has been Disruption Drive. Jim Gibbs, thank you so much for joining. And everyone else listening, see you all next week.